That note, we're going to get into the topic of the week. It's going to be a little more casual. I don't have a guest this week, so what we are going to be talking about today is whether or not nerd is mainstream. And what I mean by that is basically we're going to discuss all about whether or not nerd culture, right? Things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is an example of a nerd culture and whether or not that's mainstream. We'll talk about Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, D&D even, and Magic the Gathering, stuff like that. And then I want to talk about the implications of that, what that means for the future of media, what that means for like in general paradigm shifts that are going to happen in culture in our community. So it's going to be a cool conversation. I'm going to boot up a game. We're going to be playing. What are you guys thinking? You guys thinking Valorant or Apex? Let me know in the chat. Are you feeling Valorant or Apex today? We're going to be playing one of those two, and then we'll be talking about the topic. Once you let me know in the chat, I will boot up one of those two games. Apex, you feeling Apex? He said it first, so I'm going to roll with it. The new season just came out, which is dope, by the way. Part of me wants to talk more Apex, more specific niche games, but I feel like I want to stay broader when I talk about video game topics for the most part. Online checkers, yeah, online checkers. I want to start. I think I'm hesitant about certain topics because I don't want to alienate people. I know a lot of people don't play Apex, so I don't want to alienate people on those topics. I know generally a lot of the topics I do focus on, people are aware of. So I try to keep it like that. But again, if I get too niche, you know, I don't want to alienate people and have something that people can't sit in on and can't enjoy. What are you guys thinking? This layout or this layout? I don't know which one. The gameplay full screen, maybe this one. Kind of like this one. It's a little more fancy. Am I right? You know, a little fancier. Look at that new season. It's so nice, dude. It's so like crisp looking. I really enjoy the new season of Apex. Yeah, I always wonder. There's a couple topics, and we'll get into them today because that's going to be part of what we're discussing. Gaming and streaming are going to be things that we're going to be talking about for it. And also let me know the volume levels, make sure they're okay. But I want to make sure like we're going to be talking about that because there's a lot of topics that are actually like really cool that I like, but obviously like Marvel and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, those and Rick and Morty, you know, those are the kind of topics that like everyone, a lot of people enjoy, a lot of people know. And in video gaming, there's a few ones that really take the center stage. Obviously, Fortnite was one of those games where like everyone knew Fortnite, everyone talked about Fortnite. That was an acceptable one. Warzone is probably that right now. So there are a few. Obviously, general concepts like the consoles. We talked about the console wars last week. Those things are also like bigger topics. But today specifically, we're talking about nerd culture in general because obviously nerd culture is expansive. And we're going to be going into the different expanses of it. I really just want to open it up to you and continue talking. What do you think are primary topics for nerd culture? So continue to talk with me. Let me know if for any reason the volume's too loud or anything while I'm playing. I want to make sure you guys can hear me. Obviously, I'm just playing as background for us, but really our conversation is what's important. So I want to talk about, is nerd mainstream? And what I mean by that is like, I'm going to go through a category and we're going to talk about it. So basically, if you look back in the day, there's always been certain things that have been classified as nerdy, right? Movies, series, comics, anime, and fantasy, right? So there's always been these nerd topics, right? These nerd concepts. One of the biggest ones, and I want to start with this one. It's the easiest one to cover. Has always been comics, right? And what's been weird is you know, there's like movies have always been big, but once comic book movies entered the scene, they never really got. They started off not getting a whole lot of recognition. You know, obviously they weren't a big chunk of the film industry, but then they kind of found their niche. And with movies like the Dark Knight trilogy, with movies like the original Spider-Man films, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, which everyone knows. Obviously, that was the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. So the ones that a lot of the people watching right now probably grew up with. Oddly, they found their niche and they really grew. Then, obviously, the Marvel Cinematic Universe kicked off and it got even bigger than we thought it could get. Obviously, the Dark Knight trilogy was really praised, but even those, they were comic book movies, but they also were like more gritty, more real. And comics have been pretty much universally considered one of the nerdiest things ever. Stormbreaker, you're right. And the fact that now, when you go to those films, this is cool. This is a really cool concept. Okay. Before, and I've heard people talk about this on streams, right? And this is kind of like the interesting thing. Okay, so there's people like me. Stormbreaker, I know for a fact you're one of them as well, because we met on a different guy's nerd Marvel Star Wars streaming channel. But basically, by the way, this guy's got a great name. Whatever. There's a lot of people that just love talking about comic book movies, comic book movies, comic book adaptations in film. There's a ton of people that love talking about that stuff, and it's become popular. Some of the biggest YouTubers talk about that kind of content. Isn't that crazy? But what's even more interesting is with the comic book movies now being bigger and better than ever, when you go to those films, what's the first thing that you notice happening? You notice when you go to the film, you go watch the movie, and you say, hey, who's that guy? And guess what? Anytime you have a question, you go to the nerd that has spent the most time researching that topic. Those people that have spent this whole time trying to learn the ins and outs of that universe. Now they know everything. They're the expert, and you want to go to that person. You want to talk to that person. You want to know, hey, why is that character doing that certain thing? Why is this that way? And why is that way? Also, I'm realizing I massively changed my sensitivity, which is why I'm wondering why I can't do anything. And that's why I had it way lower. Okay. It's a very bizarre thing. I'm leaking my proprietary controller settings, guys. But isn't that bizarre? Why you want to go to, when you go to those movies, which everyone wants to go to because they're the thing to do now. That's the thing to do. Everyone goes out to see a Marvel movie together. Everyone goes out to, catch the next big Marvel film. That's the movie. Those are the blockbuster movies. They're making $1 billion each. That's not something that happens lightly, and that's a sign, when those movies are making more than any other movie in the film industry, that should say, hey, this isn't a niche thing anymore. Nerds aren't the minority anymore. Everybody loves those things. And Stormbreaker says, I think the beautiful side of being a nerd is the quick escape you get from reality and all that BS that's going on in the world. Yeah, I mean, there is a form of escapism that happens in that. And now that the movies are being made on such a high quality, that just means that the escapism in itself is also a higher quality. So I mean, what does that mean? Because these, it's not just that you go see a Marvel movie, right? It's not that you just go see a Marvel movie. When you go to see the Marvel movie, the people that you go with, you're always going to take that nerd is coordinating that event. Those nerds are coordinating that event. It's not all of the athletes going together, though they might. But guess what? They're always going to want to take that nerd that knows everything about it. And that person it's kind of weird. You know, that person for that moment is like, they know they're the person you go to. They're like, what is going on here? What is this person? Who is that? And because they know all this secret knowledge that suddenly is valuable, right? And it's kind of funny because for the first time, you know, you used to have all this extensive comic book knowledge and it used to mean nothing, right? You could have extensive knowledge about the comic books, never meant anything. But now, if you know all about these comics and stuff, you can tell a story to all of these people that are going to see a movie for the first time. You can be like, hey, I know who this character is, and guess what? I know all this stuff they're going to do in the future, and this is going to be a really cool storyline they're going to explore, and they're going to do this. And that's like a really cool and valuable person to have with you when you're going to those films. It's a really unique take that you probably don't get. Oh my goodness, I'm in a fight. I am trash. I am trash. I need to turn my sense up. I'm so trash. I feel like my... Oh, I'm so trash. Woo. I'm going to punch him. Get over here. All right. I was lagging hard. I don't know what that was about. I'm blaming it on that. Oh, I know why. Because I'm not hardwired right now. I'm typically hardwired to the internet, and I'm not. So that's probably why it is going rough on me. But regardless, that was a sucky match. I did bad. I'm sorry. What do you guys think about that? So, I mean, Marvel, I think if we went through each category, I think a good way to start is just go through each category and let's talk about why that thing is mainstream and you know, what caused it to be mainstream. Obviously, Marvel comics have been propelled by the movie industry. And some people might make the argument that Marvel movies aren't nerdy. But they'd be wrong because guess what? They started as comics, which were considered one of the most nerdy things ever. So I think what more than likely is the cause is that like a nerdy thing is mainstream now. Isn't that weird? To be honest, I still think there's a lot of people who think you're weird. Yeah, everyone thinks I'm weird. Do you mean like people in like Marvel movies are weird, or like people that are like talking all about it? I don't know. Like, I mean, it's just you know what's funny? I actually saw a comedian. I'm forgetting his name, but he had a comedy special, I think, on Netflix, and he talked about how like he made a comparison of Marvel fans to Christians or like religious people, and it was really funny about the way they talk about it. People think nerds are weird. I do think that's true, but I think more people than not would say that it's actually like would actually think that those things are cool. One Buffalo said, I feel like sports being on hold during this nerd stuff has become a lot more relevant. Yeah, I do think that's true. People have something to lean on more. And that's actually gonna be a big point I want to talk about is the implication of that after the fact. So comic book movies obviously have propelled the comic industry. Obviously it's made superheroes and stuff like that more prevalent, less nerdy and more mainstream, right? So I think we can kind of shelf that one and Marvel because that's an easy concept. Which, by the way, small plug, the streams from the last 2 weeks will be the last 3 weeks will be put up over the course of this week. So the first stream is going to be premiering after the Den of Nerds live stream tonight. So after my stream, the Den of Nerds always streams their community stream. Oh, come on. So after my stream, the Den Nerds has their community stream, and then after that, which is at 9 p.m. On YouTube, my previous stream about where me and Stormbreaker talked all about the Marvel Phase 4, the new movies coming out. That movie that's gonna be re-premiered on YouTube, so you can go on at 9 p.m. tonight and re-watch that stream if you wanted to check it out. And you know, because we talk all about Marvel stuff, and it's definitely nerdy. And most people you'd say, hey, that's nerdy, but the reality is everyone's watching it. And the same goes for Game of Thrones, which I think is a natural segue. Let's talk about Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was another example of something that was very nerdy, right? This fantasy world with these knights, or, they were obviously not knights, but these kings and, these royal lords and this battle for land and control and all these crazy things. Oh, there's no community stream today. Okay, well, it's still going to go on at 9. Actually, maybe I'll push the video premiere to 8 p.m. So when I'm done here, you can hop over and watch that if you want to. So that'll be your choice. That'll give you if you want to watch that stream, you can segue this right into that stream and watch it if you want. And you know what, GB Crash, you made a good point. Sports are nerdy. You know what? I think there's a difference though. Because, and maybe this is the difference, right? I think the difference is if people aren't able, let me give you an example. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. If you're a sports fan, and then you go and you have a ton of stuff in your room, and you do fantasy leagues, and you track stats and stuff like that. People don't really say anything. They don't really consider anything. It's not people aren't people don't feel weird about talking about it to people. And but it's always seemed to kind of be that way, right? But Marvel and DC and these superhero movies, if you watch them, right, it could be normal, right? It's normal. Even though some people might still be like, it's kind of weird that you watch those. And then if you are super serious into them and you keep Marvel stuff in your room and you talk about the new movies and stuff like that, people might think you're weird, right? And I think that to me is that says that it's nerdy. But the reality is the mainstream stuff is still mainstream, right? So even if you were to consider, I don't know, before, if you really, really liked comic book movies, you're probably weird. If you were an adult and you liked comic book movies way too much back in the day, not weird, I'm not saying you're weird, but people probably thought you were nerdy, right? That they were oh, that's pretty nerdy. But nowadays they're oh yeah, those movies are great. Most people would agree comic book movies are great. Back then, probably not as universal. Right? And that to me is the distinction. You're right. Sports are kind of nerdy. In that way, I'm a stats nerd. Yeah, dude, I definitely, I think that there is, I'm not disagreeing that it is nerdy, but I think that most people wouldn't, it's a different type, and I don't think most people would consider it nerdy in the same way. Let me get this real quick, and I'm gonna join this guy. So in that way, I think it's very. I would say comic book movies, comic books in general, have become mainstream, right? And I'm gonna say honestly, I think even more than mainstream, I think that they drive the movie industry right now. I think that they have such an overwhelming impact on the movie industry. It's unbelievable. Man, I had a 30-minute conversation with a girl just because of me having a Marvel poster on my wall. I was like, well, you're not seeing me again. Oh, man, Stormbreaker. That's so sad. Oh, no. Come on. Ah, come on. Okay. Oh, that's kind of a bummer, Stormbreaker. She wasn't right then, man. She just wasn't right. No, I was the one saying not her. Oh, wait. Was she Yeah, no, I get you. You said I'm not seeing her again because of the way she acted. Yeah, dude, I get that, man. Honestly, if someone's being like that and they're hating on you for something you enjoy, it's always been that way, okay? If anyone hates on you for something you enjoy and you're not hurting anybody and it's just a hobby you like, nothing wrong with that. And if a person's making fun of you for that, they're not a cool person. So that's just what it is. Enough fishes in the sea. That's right, man. Sorry you had to deal with that regardless. But that's the thing. Comic book movies are driving the movie industry. So that's one example of an extreme, right? Where not only is this like a nerdy thing that became mainstream, Marvel is like paving the way for certain parts of the movie industry. And if you think I'm exaggerating, then explain to me why so many other movies are trying to replicate the Marvel formula and create their own cinematic universes. I'm not saying Marvel's the first to make a cinematic universe, but they are the first to do a cinematic universe to that scale in such a successful way. It's proved to be financially successful, and people are trying to recreate that. So that's what I mean by it. And I challenge you to make a better example. Oh my goodness, Stormbreaker. PG-17. We've talked about this. I'm going to give you another example. Star Wars. Star Wars, Game of Thrones, these sci-fi and fantasy titans of films, Lord of the Rings, these films and TV show icons that these things people might consider nerdy. Here's an example. And I think a big reason, I think one of the weirdest things about this is the idea of TV and movie adaptations. Some things, I think there's a conversation to be had about TV and movie adaptations and how they affect and drive what's mainstream and not mainstream. Because for some reason, if you were obsessed with Game of Thrones, the books, right? People would probably have called you a nerd. Not a bad thing. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Don't ever think that I'm, bashing the term nerd. I think it's a term of endearment. But reasonably so, if you are called a nerd for something, that's probably nerdy. And the best way to put it, like, if you read the Game of Thrones books and you're like, oh, I love the Game of Thrones books, people probably thought that was nerdy, right? But then something happened because the movies came out, or the TV shows came out for Game of Thrones. They were really, really good. And then suddenly everyone was like, you know what? This isn't nerdy. Or this is nerdy, but I love it anyway, right? And I wonder if it's a barrier to entry about it, about books or comics that controls what's nerdy and mainstream. Like, I almost wonder, and let me know what you think about this, but if comics, let's give you an example. Let's say comic books didn't exist, which would be a very, very sad thing. But let's just say for a hypothetical, let's say comic books never existed. Okay? If suddenly the Marvel Cinematic Universe came out and it was a massive success, would it ever have been considered nerdy? Or was it the medium that was nerdy? Maybe there's an argument to be had that Marvel Cinematic Universe is only nerdy because of the comics. And had it just been the movies, it wouldn't have been nerdy. The same could have been said with Game of Thrones. Had Game of Thrones, just been... Ooh. Oh my goodness. I think it's a genuine question to ask, because what drives the term nerd? What controls that? Let me get this kill real quick. Come on, I'm an awful shot today. I am playing trash today, guys. Literal trash. I'm awful. Yeah. But if there were no comics, there was no MCU. Yeah, I'm saying hypothetically somebody created the idea of the MCU outside of comics, right? They're like, let's make these movies about these random characters that I just created, right? Would that have been different? Would we have called that nerdy? And I guess that's what I mean by that. Also, this dude's carrying me because I'm playing like total trash right now. Because I don't even know why. I don't know how to describe it to you. I promise you, maybe I'll reconnect to a hard line and then I'll play this again and I'll prove to you guys after this is done that I'm not trash. I have a feeling I'll still prove that I'm trash, but it's fine. I think it would have been nerdy just because of superheroes. And maybe that is true. Maybe superheroes are just nerdy in general. Also, this guy's just carrying me. What is going on? Oh, got that punch kill. Let's do it. I'm also, yeah, I'm lagging heavily if you guys can see that. I don't know, GB Crash, to answer your question, I'm not, and you're right. There needs to be a better definition. And I think the hard part about, that prevents me from answering that question more specifically and more defined is I don't know if there's ever been a really clear definition of what nerdiness is. Because, and I mean, maybe that's part of the issue. I mean, it's always just been, I think it started as something meant to be derogatory, meant to be an insult to people that enjoy stuff like comic books and the like. And I think what happened was it kind of got, it's always been kind of this negative connotation for things that maybe are outside of the mainstream, but have a almost cult-like following of it. I don't know how to better put that. So maybe that's is there a working definition we could work with? Do you guys have a working definition for what you think it should be? Do you think there's a better working definition for what is a nerd? I'm coming back on that because not all superheroes are nerdy. Hellboy, Spawn, Bloodshot. That's a good point. I honestly think, like, look back to the movie Hancock. You remember Hancock? That movie, I don't think anyone called that nerdy. I don't think anyone called that movie nerdy. Granted, it was R rating, and the whole game changes when you talk about R-rated movies. I get it. But still, I think for the most part, you'd say that wasn't a nerdy movie. So what's the difference between that and, you know, Spider-Man or something? And everyone watches Spider-Man films. So, but would they, you know, is that, again, Spider-Man's one of the most popular characters of all time. So what defines nerdy? I think you're right, GB Crash, that we need a definition. Somebody somebody just Google somebody Google the textbook definition of nerdy. See if there is one. I'm sure there is one, but I can't think of one. I think it's something like being absorbed into a subject, piece of art, story that is in some way otherworldly or fantasy. It is a disengagement with terrestrial reality. Ooh, that's a really good definition. It's a good definition. Also, there's a fight going on, and I'm gonna die. So, I don't really think there's a perfect answer to this. And so I think in a lot of ways, this is more of a philosophical question to kind of talk about what is nerdy and why does it exist, right? I think a lot of people, I think the term nerdy was created to, like anything derogatory, is created to denounce something that people don't understand. It stems from a fear or from a lack of understanding, right? Because I think most fear is driven from a lack of understanding. Wouldn't you say? And it's kind of it's almost a it's a human nature problem, right? It's when it stems from a lack of understanding. Where is this guy? You know, like I almost think nerdiness could be traced back to the beginning days of like comics and D&D, right? These are the things that people did mostly in small groups. They did it to themselves, right? I mean, you can understand that when you look back at like D&D for an example, which is one I do want to talk about. D&D is an example of something that was against the norm for a different reason, right? I mean, it was originally not something accepted because a lot of people thought it was cultish, right? It got this negative connotation of being, and a false connotation, might I add, that people playing D&D were parts of cults, right? And there was like cultic practices. Simply because people didn't understand what these people were doing. Why are they, playing a game in a room by themselves, making up a new reality, right? What was that? Like, people didn't understand what it was, and therefore they feared it, which I think was even more prevalent in the past, though we do still see many clear examples today of that being something that still happens, where people have a fear of something they don't know or understand, right? So I think that started with that. Comic books is another example, but comic books probably got their negative connotation just because of the fact that this is something that people do on their own, and it's new. Obviously, it talks about these larger than life beings, which probably, which rooted back to, how can you create a being that's larger than humans, larger than life. Kind of a similar negative connotation that D&D had, where it might be considered like, you're writing these stories about characters, but like these characters aren't biblical, right? I think a lot of reasons. I think there's probably a lot of religious connotations why a lot of it started. But more interesting than that, I think nerdiness. When people started reading comic books, people probably just like, I don't know what this is, right? So I think it's weird. I think most people, if they see something they've never seen before, I think a lot of people's instinctive reaction is to think this is weird, and then only by being accustomed to it, humans can adapt by nature. They're adaptive by nature, when given that chance, right? So I think instinctively people are going to be like, that's weird. But then as they get more and more accustomed to something, they can adapt quickly, and that'll be something they grow to enjoy. And I think that's how a lot of things come. And that's why I think nerdiness can be eventually adaptive into mainstream quite easily, because things that are nerdy are still popular amongst that subsect of people. Let me get into Stormbreaker's comment. A nerd is someone who reads comics and manga, watches fantasy and sci-fi movies and series, watches anime and anime shows, plays D&D and nerdy games like Overwatch and Star Wars. Actually, it's a substitution of series of interests in outward life with fantasy, other worlds games. Nerd is someone who reads comics and manga, watches fantasy. Oh, I got that twice. I think both of you are really on to something important here. Let me help my friend out here, and then I'll inject with more comments. Let me just get that guy real quick. I think you're both really on to something here. I think there's a lot of very important considerations, and I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I think there's more than one type of nerd, right? Like, I think being a nerd is not singular. I wrecked that guy. That's just saying what a nerd does, not a nerd is. And that, do you think, is there one unilateral definition of what a nerd is, or do you think are there different types of nerds? I definitely healed up, but whatever. It didn't work. You're right. It's not just important to say what a nerd does. It is, we have to get into the deeper sense of what they are, right? I would venture to say I'd venture to say that nerds are just passionate people that found an outlet outside of the norm to express themselves, right? Oh. Oh. Whew. Whoa, I'm getting stuck. I'm gonna die. It's over. But I have like a really important question. Am I the only one who acts very different with friends you're around at that time? For an example, I'm acting different around my normal, not nerdy friends than my nerdy friends. The question is, which friends do you feel like you're having a more meaningful conversation with? And I'll give you an example. I do think there's different parts of me that I extend out more when I'm talking with certain people, right? For example, I like to talk about philosophy. I like to get into deep-rooted conversations, and I want to talk about life. I want to talk about religion. I want to talk about, our beliefs and nature and consciousness, right? I like to talk about those things, and there are certain people that I know I can have a very meaningful conversation with about those things, and there's certain people that's just not what their interest is. And so I might not talk about those things. That's still an important part of me, but I might not talk about those things to those people, right? Versus if I like to talk about comics and Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and all of these things, those things are super important to me to talk about, right? Those are cool outlets for me to express myself in ways I like to talk about things and maybe practice the art of thought in a way, right? When I talk about theories and stuff that, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter at all. But I like to work my brain and see what can I create out of something that's already been created. I like exploring new worlds, right? So that's something that's also important to me. Some people want know about that stuff, care about that stuff as well. So I'm going to have an easier time talking to them about those things. I don't think there's a wrong answer. And I think just because some things you don't talk about with certain people, there's always going to be that way. Not everybody cares about the same things you care about every time. What matters is that whoever you're talking to, whatever you're talking about is something that matters to you, to them. Doesn't have to matter in the grand scheme of life, but it matters to you and it matters to them. That's a meaningful conversation. And as long as you feel fulfilled by the conversations you're having with your friends, regardless of it, if they're your friends that love Marvel or your friends that love Star Wars or your friends that love working out or sports, those are different things that different people like. And maybe they're all nerdy, maybe they're not, but you're sharing valuable time. Maybe not valuable information, but valuable time with that person. And you feel that you're getting value out of that time with those people. So I think in that way, there's no wrong answer. So I would say I would extend to you to look, whether or not you're you may have your real friends and your other friends, maybe they just share different likeness in your conversations. Maybe they just have different interests, right? But here's another thing, and this is a totally different thing. You can also have friends who you have very little shared interest with, and that's also okay, right? Sometimes there are friends that you don't really have a whole lot to talk about with them, but you guys have fun regardless. I have some friends, maybe I don't share as much in common with them, but that doesn't take away from the time that I have with those people. And I think that's an important thing to note is you could have like I don't think decide you should decide friends based off of shared interest all the time. Some friends you just maybe you have shared experiences with, right? Which is a different thing, obviously. Maybe some friends you have, you just enjoy being around, right? It does not. That's not always. That doesn't always equate to having similar interests to have conversation about. You know. Let me see where this guy is. So I mean, I think that I think there's a lot to. Yeah, I mean, One Buffalo. That's good. That's a good point. I mean, we don't have the same interests all the time, but I mean, I don't think that takes away from the enjoyment and time we spend together. Oh my goodness. I mean, you can have a lot of fun with people you don't share a whole lot of interest with, and that's totally fine. I mean, I think good friends stay together regardless of whether or not they have a lot of common ground. I think the important thing is finding the common ground you do have and enjoying that time together. You know, I would of course prefer my nerdy friends. Yeah, my nerdy fans. No, I mean nerdy friends are like my real friends who have a big bond with, but my other friends are like the ones who I go to parties and things like that. But I mean, at the same time, you might also like you enjoy that time with those people. I think a lot of times, you're good friends. It's not about what conversations you have, what you can talk about, what you can do together. Honestly, I find most time you just don't need to think about whether or not like if you have a good friend. A lot of times, it's just whether or not that person's there for you and you're there for them. I'm not saying like talk to them all the time or anything, but like really like, do you know that person, has your back? I think that's a definition better of a good friend, than anything. So, I mean, I mean, because one thing, and I'll tell you this right off the bat, like I can be, and I know sure some of you that know me personally in here would attest to this. I'm a horrible communicator. I know I'm on streams all the time, but I'm a horrible communicator. I I don't text often, right? I don't I really don't. I'll give people phone calls when I can, but I'm really bad at communicating. But I'd like to think most of the time, if someone reaches out to me, like I will be there for those people, when I as much as I can. So, and I think that means a lot more. More people, more like people I know very well. 90% of those party friends I wouldn't even call real friends. Well, that's another thing. I mean, there's people that are acquaintances, and it's also okay to have acquaintances. Honestly. Oh, that's a thing. Yeah, I mean, it's okay to have acquaintances. There's nothing wrong with having people you like to hang out with, but you might not consider your friends. That's fine. I'm playing like trash. Man, I'm getting really into the philosophical. I like this. I like this conversation. I'm a terrible communicator, too. But that like more because of the thing that happened in the past. Yeah, that's another thing. I think it's like it's also very important. Try not to like. You never know what's going on with people. I mean, you never. I use my whole shield battery and I go. So I mean, there's also like, there's the other thing too. Like you have to be like careful not like if you have a friend that has meant something to you, never like be careful not to like just dismiss people because I mean sometimes you'll have a friend, right, and you'll be communicating with them, but just because maybe they've stopped communicating, that doesn't really necessarily mean anything about your friendship. So like you always should like um I find more times than not uh friendships aren't lost from conflict. Friendships are lost um from poor assumptions. Like a lot of times you'll have a friend like friends that like lose touch with each other. The reason they lose touch isn't because they had like a falling out or anything. More often than not, it's just because, well, I don't know, haven't oof. You know what I mean? I think more often than not, it's just like, oh, well, we had, we used to talk a lot. We don't talk as much. So, like, oh, I guess, we just did our own thing. And I don't know, just never really reached out again. And I think that's a reason that a lot of people lose friends. So I would say if you ever have like somebody that's like, that was at one point important to you, I'd say, reach out to them. This dude is all about it. He said, I'm trying to win. This dude is upset. Ooh. Sorry, guys, it's getting heated. Give me 1 second. I can bet that from the people I know at school, there are maybe two that I'll keep communicating with, just the way life goes. Yeah, and that's the thing is like, are you, you know, like you don't have to. Life gets busy, right? I didn't know that this nerd conversation was going to get into this stuff, but I'm glad we are. I mean, I don't mind talking about it ever. Never, don't take for granted like those friendships either, because reality is like sometimes you might be like, oh, we just talk because it's convenient. We're in college, whatever. But like, just because like there will be people that maybe you just never really felt a real connection with anyway as a friend. But if you think it's just because like, wow, we'll probably do our own thing, don't be too quick to ditch friends. You know. This dude is wrecking house. Oh, come on. Don't do it, man. Oh man, that guy's probably so mad at me. The others are more, yeah, but I know those two people are like real friends. And the others are more friends. Those other two friends. Yeah, I get that. I think, I just think like if you feel like you're close to somebody, don't ever think like because we haven't talked a while, it'd be easier to not have friends. Because I mean, college, high school, those are your two big times to meet friends. And the reality is those are probably if you being realistic, those are the two times you're going to meet friends. Those are the two times you're going to have the most opportunity to meet friends. So you either kind of have the option to either keep those people or you might not get friends to that scale ever again. You know, you might not get friends that are that important to you ever again. I'm not saying that's 100% the case, but those are your two best odds. It's like, so I mean, think about it. There's not a whole lot of apps for meeting friends. You know, there's dating apps. Oh, look at this. It's got flowers on it. I'm gonna get that. Um, you know, but you know, like this is your time to meet friends. So you should always try to stick with them. Anyway, I always like talking about that kind of stuff. So I'm glad we got on a little tangent. I'm okay with going every once in a while on a little bit of a tangent, a little bit off the normal conversation point. But I don't know. I had fun with it. Anyway, I want to get back to things that are nerdy and things that are mainstream. Like you said, Stormbreaker. Let's try to get them back on track a little bit. We talked about comics and Star Wars, Lord of the Rings and stuff. I find that there's this concept of, I think there's a medium factor that plays into it, right? So I think a lot of people would say, comic books and fantasy and sci-fi novels are nerdy, but then it's going to be a lot less than the case when it's in another medium that's easier to access. So I think things like like movies and television, when you can have a big spectacle of it, right? Maybe there's more of a merging of the things that people that are casuals, right? Because casuals are really people that aren't as much nerdy but are susceptible to those nerdy things. Those people are more accepted to it, right? And that brings it into the mainstream. When there's casual fans and the casual fans outnumber the niche people, I feel like that's what makes something mainstream, right? So Lord of the Rings, the novels have people that are diehard fans. Those people are probably nerds. But when someone's like, I've just watched the movies, I don't know a whole lot about them, I enjoyed the movies. Those are casual people, right? You can be a nerd by just liking the movies, but you'd be looking past the surface, right? I think a lot of people that are nerds look past the surface, right? They take what's at face value and they go past it because they're passionate about what that is and they want to know more, right? I think maybe that could be said about anything, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe, you know what? I think I'm onto something here. Maybe that's what a nerd is. It's someone that's passionate enough to take what they have at face value and say, I want to go past this and I want to see what's beyond it.
I do not care who makes the kill.
Just a side note, I finally watched the Kings movies yesterday. And man, those movies are sweet. Yeah, those are really cool. Really, really cool. The first movie, the church fight scene, that was like phenomenal. But I think that could assess it, right? Because we talk about like, oh, there is a sports nerd, right? We talked about One Buffalo, how he considers himself a sports nerd, right? But isn't just maybe really what being a nerd is being passionate about something and taking it past the surface. Is music nerdy? I mean, if we take this premise, right, of having something that is at face value and pushing past it because you're passionate about what this is to understand more, right? You take your time, you invest your own time in pursuing past something and understanding more. I think maybe that really is what being a nerd is. So, because, that's why we say, oh, if you really like sports past this, you're a nerd, right? That would make sense to me. But I think it raises a question as to why is it that people are so quick to call something a nerdy thing when all it is just being passionate about something. Why is it so instinctive because nerd has almost always had a negative connotation. So why is it that people are so, what am I doing here? Why is it people are so quick to put a negative connotation on being passionate about something? Oh, Lego, in my opinion, is also nerdy. I think there's a lot of nerdy things, right? I mean, and that's what it comes down to is like anything you can be passionate about. There are music nerds. There are sports nerds. But they're really just people who care about something. And you're like, you know what? Maybe this thing is trivial, but it gives a meaning to me, and I think it's important. And that's why they've decided to invest their time in it. And maybe people see, well, you're investing your time in something that's useless, right? It has no utility to it has no utility to society, and therefore it is a useless tool. So there's this negative connotation, and I honestly think, oh my goodness, I'm about to get really philosophical here. This is what I was saying. This is going to be a different stream. This is going to be a different type of stream here. Are you ready? It's going to be weird. Stick with me. You're a TPF right now. Keep speaking the truth. Burke, you would be a great... Thank you, man. I actually considered being a philosophy minor, but for school. I still think one of my dream jobs, and I still probably will one day, is to teach philosophy. But anyway, I'm about to get really deep on you guys right now. I hope you're ready. And by the way, that's something any philosopher would say. No. I think that nerdiness stems from the capitalist idea of not being productive. Okay? Stay with me. And maybe it's not just purely capitalist, but let's think for a second. When, capitalism implies that your utility stems from your ability to produce, your ability to be a worker in society. You have to work and provide income, right? Therefore, anything that provides utility to you, anything that provides would be something that provides income or purpose for yourself and therefore your society, right? Capitalism strives on people working as much as working to be able to benefit their society. So when you're doing something that's nerdy, so to speak, right? You're doing something that is not considered a productive activity. This is not something that is going to provide utility. This is not going to be something that's going to provide income. It's not going to benefit a GDP, so to speak. This is something, and I'm not saying this is just a purely capitalist idea, but most societies in the world realistically look down on things that don't provide utility to yourself or to your country or to your culture or your community. So when you look at something, I mean, even look at entertainment, right? Entertainment can provide a utility, but only to a certain extent. Also, I really want that. That's fine. So I would venture to say that nerd as a derogatory term derives from this idea that you're not being productive, right? Nerd is someone who's passionate about something to go beyond the surface on something that is considered non-productive in society. Okay? So I think we're developing deeper into it now, right? I think we're working on that definition of what nerd is, right? Something that is considered going past the surface of something that could be something normal, and going past the surface and investing time and effort and interest in something that is considered non-productive to society. Okay? Now, inherently, you should say, well, why is that an issue, right? Why is it an issue to have something I'm interested in and want to spend time in something I'm interested in? Well, the reason is because it serves no utility. Now, there is nothing at all wrong with it. I'm going to tell you right now, that is not a problem. Wanting to invest your time in something that is considered not a utility, but something that brings you joy. Joy is something that brings you joy is a utility. It is not considered by majority of societies to be a utility, but I can tell you right now that it is a utility. So the question becomes, what can you do about that as a society, and is that shifting? Because if we take the premise that things nerdiness, which we haven't proved, right? If we've taken the premise that nerdiness is becoming mainstream, right? If we accept the premise that nerdiness is becoming mainstream, and then we also accept the premise that, well, in order to be considered nerdy, it has to be something that is not productive to society, but you're spending most of your time in. So you would be accepting, if you accept both of those premises, then you're accepting, you have to accept the other premise, which is that the majority of people, it is now becoming mainstream, right? It is now becoming mainstream to do things that are not productive to society, that don't provide benefit to society, but you find enjoyment in, right? So that would suggest that if that's true, if nerdiness is actually becoming mainstream, then that means that it's becoming mainstream to do things that you enjoy, even if they're not a utility to the society, even if they don't benefit society in some certain way. People are actually starting to say, hey, what do I care about? What are things that I'm interested in and I'm passionate about and so interested in that regardless of whether or not it has benefit to a nation or a community, I'm getting enjoyment out of it, so I'm going to pursue it. I think that says something really cool about the future. I think you could take a pessimistic approach, and I'm sure some people would say, hey, well, that really means that people aren't producing as much. People aren't, putting in as much work. People are taking too many breaks. Life's getting too easy. And you know what? People just really aren't doing enough work anymore. People are taking the easy route. People are, becoming pushovers or whatever you want to say. Whatever take you want to have, I'm choosing to take the positive route. And I'm going to say, guess what? That's a good thing for society. Oh, I got wrecked. I'm going to say that's a good thing for society. You know what? I'm going to say that means that people are starting to take time to themselves. They're starting to say, what do I care about? I don't care whether or not people think it's productive. I don't care whether or not, people are getting utility from it. I don't care whether the government's getting a higher GDP as a result of what I'm doing. I enjoy it, and therefore I'm investing my time in it. That's a really cool thing. I think it's a really cool implication. So, I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a fair assessment? Let's see what she said. Yeah, and that's so unfortunate because if something doesn't provide utility, it can deter people from getting involved. If someone who goes to amusement parks all the time a nerd, could be. I think they could be. Only if they spend all their time on spinny teacups. Yeah. It could it become productive? Now that is the question. That's the question. That's okay. So that is really cool. And there's two parts to this, right? We have two parts to ask. Okay. And I'd like to suggest that there's a dual takeaway from this, right? So we just had the first conclusion that nerdiness becoming mainstream is a sign that people are starting to pursue things that are not productive to society, don't provide a utility to society or other communities or other people, but they provide them themselves, right? So they're taking time to invest in themselves and things they find enjoyment in, right? That's a positive thing, right? But what you're asking, and One Buffalo made a good point, previously, if something didn't provide utility, it deterred people from getting involved. That's still the case a lot of times, but what we're finding is that now more than ever, nerdy things are becoming mainstream because people are choosing to forego that instinct that I can't do something unless it provides utility to my community, my society, my government, etc. Right? So the question is, could it become productive? And that is where we get to the next step of this, right? We can take two looks at this. We can say people are choosing to forego their basic instinct to find enjoyment. I'm going to do something because I get enjoyment of it. Not because it's productive, not because it provides me revenue, not because it provides GDP to society, not because it'll help me provide for my family, not because of this. I do it because I enjoy it. But amusement's always been a thing. Amusement has provided utility. You'd argue there's more amusement now, right? Nerdiness is not amusement. Nerdiness is taking amusement and going past the surface amusement to get more meat, get the meat that's behind that surface level amusement. They want to go, they're passionate about the amusement to go further in and get what they, get the deeper meaning behind something. They invest time. Because you can get amusement, but to be a nerd, you're investing time past the surface level amusement. You're investing time and effort to get a further, deeper level of value from that. Also, this dude's clutch. He just saved me. So the question is, theoretically, that person is being unproductive. A person that is being a nerd is being unproductive. They are practicing what society would consider a unhealthy amount of time invested in that thing, which means that's unproductive. However, you could also choose to say, hey, maybe we're missing something here. Maybe they're not foregoing their basic instinct. Perhaps things that were initially nerdy, things that initially were unproductive, maybe people aren't just choosing to be less productive. Maybe people are finding ways to be productive with things that previously were unproductive. So maybe what was nerdy, maybe it's not still nerdy anymore. Maybe it's only mainstream because now people have found a way to make it productive. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. And here's an example, right? Finance. People that are finance nerds. And maybe this undermines the definition. You can tell me. Is WWE nerdy? WWE is white trash anime. Changed my mind. White trash anime. Anyway, I'd argue TikTok is nerdy but extremely mainstream. Yeah, so there's the argument. I don't think nerdy and mainstream are mutually exclusive. I'm gonna say I don't think nerdy or mainstream are mutually exclusive, but I think more often than not, the reason something is considered nerdy is because it's considered unproductive, right? So you look at something like someone that spends a lot of time in finance, right? That's something that's productive, right? You are making money. So it's not just nerdy at that point. It's productive. Apparently you can hold this, by the way. I never knew. I mean, at some point you have to ask the question, like, maybe people are finding ways to make their nerdiness productive. And that comes to conversations of streaming, the gaming industry and the rise of the gaming industry, which has started since arcades made money, right?
My vision is clear. Noxious gas deployed. With only two, placing an independent variable.
You know, those things.
My vision is clear. Leaving a gas trap behind. I still see everything.
Ooh, sorry, I'm about to get this dub. Oh, oh, oh.
Recharging shields. We've simply removed the kill leader from the equation.
I mean, I think nerdiness could become mainstream, but first we have to get rid of the furries and the 40-year-old crying guys about kids' TV shows. No, listen. That's part of it, dude. They're nerds. They're fine. They like what they like, and we don't like it, so we think it's nerdy. The problem is there's no line. As long as you're not harming others, as long as you're not violating anyone else's rights, guess what? You got to accept them all. Even the furries.
45 seconds.
I understand. I'm not saying I don't think some things are weird, but the problem is like that's other people at other times thought other things were weird, and now they don't think they're weird. That doesn't mean that they didn't think they were weird. Furries could be a very mainstream thing in the future, honestly, and maybe sadly, depending on your input or outlook. You know, I mean, probably even furries will at some point become, mainstream.
10 seconds remain. The ring
It's not beyond the realm of possibility, and it's weird. All right, we keep the 40-year-old mans, but furries are just sick, in my opinion. That's the thing though. Like people thought D&D back in the day, right? They thought, oh my, I'm getting lasered.
independent variable added. Deploying a variable. Recharging shields.
Hold up, let me get this win real quick. I mean, you really have to ask yourself the question, like, you know, do you think that things if you accept that the society wants to be productive, right? The instinct to be productive, to do something that provides value, to produce, right? Dude, he clutched it. He clutched. Then perhaps now people in society are starting to get creative and find ways. Also, I just hit 200, guys. Yay. Did that just say I've played 1.97 thousand games? What the heck? Wow. Friend me, boys. So, like, perhaps people are starting to find ways to be productive doing things that originally were nerdy. So, does that A, make nerdy things productive, in which the definition needs to be changed? Or does that make those things no longer nerdy? Here's an example. Kevin Feige. He just basically found the magic formula to make comic book movies, to actualize comic books. Star Wars. You know, I mean, George Lucas was like, made this sci-fi universe, definitely nerdy, makes billions of dollars in movies. Is that still nerdy? For him? He's making money. Making Star Wars. Kevin Feige And all of the people working at Marvel are making billions of dollars making comic book movies. So the question is like, is something only nerdy when you're not being productive? Are those people still nerds? Or are they not nerds because they found a way to monetize and be productive doing those things? Right? Like, if you are passionate about something, and I think this does really break down to the fact that society, I don't think society would call Kevin Feige a nerd. They would say he's a businessman, right? Because he found a way to be productive. To be productive was something that was nerdy for other people. Other people that are investing time in it but not being productive would not be called nerdy, or would be called nerdy. So I mean, really, you have to assess. I think it's a societal issue that says if you're not being productive, you're a nerd. And I think you have to break past that, and you have to say, you know what? That's not. You can be a nerd. It's okay to be a nerd. I think that's what it comes down to. Is you have to take a look at it and be like, you know what? It's okay to be a nerd, and to say, guess what? Like, I don't need to be productive to invest time in something that I enjoy. And I think honestly, I think it's time to look past it and say, guess what? It's a good thing to be a nerd, because it means that guess what? You're investing at time in something that doesn't provide utility. You're actually striving to be happier. I think when you break outside of that societal norm that productivity is the only way, is the only thing you should do. Like, that term was designed to tell you, hey, you can't, if you're not being productive, you shouldn't be doing it. If you're not producing for society, you shouldn't be doing it. And that's just not true. It's important to invest in things that don't make you that just make you happy. It's important to invest in things that just make you happy. It's okay to have something that you enjoy that just makes you happy, that doesn't provide a utility. There doesn't need to be, there doesn't need to be a, magic number to decide whether or not it's worth doing something. The only thing that makes something worth doing something is if you get enjoyment out of it. I will read your comment after I get this kill. I will get this man. Oh, we got another. I hope no one else is here. Dude, I was on... Sorry. Let me heal up. You guys like I'm clutching right now? Dude, I was on a con in Brussels, and I saw a girl. This girl, the coolest Master Chief cosplay ever. She destroyed it with a furry head and a tail, which you would be surprised. Oh my goodness. Dude, I don't know. I mean, at one point, you know, you got to be like, you know what, that's what they like, that's what they enjoy. It provides them enjoyment, and regardless of what, you know, we think of it, it's something that provides them value, and realistically, it doesn't provide any harm to us, you know. So I mean, you got to kind of you can take one side or the other. You can say, you know, hey, I want to say that you shouldn't hate on people for pursuing what they enjoy, or you can say, or you can, you know, judge people for doing what they enjoy. And in which case, that's the reason. That's why nerds started, is for the same reason. And I'm not saying like there aren't things that I don't think are weird, you know, but at the end of the day, I mean, isn't everything weird in some way? I don't know. I mean, that's my take on it. Burke, when are you going to become a deer? A deer? Oh, you mean like a furry deer? Tomorrow probably, you know. As soon as I get off the stream, I just put on my costume. I'm not saying, all right, let me back up though. I'm not saying you can't rip on people. I'm not saying at all you can't rip on people. Go ahead. I don't really care. I don't think there's any, I mean, listen. I don't think there's anything wrong with you know, jokes, you know, making jokes. I don't care. But I do think, like, you know, if you think, it depends, it comes from being, it's the difference between being joking and hate speech, you know? It's like, are you saying something because you're like, you know, it's funny, you know? Something can be funny to you. That's totally cool. You know? But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, that's something somebody enjoys. Good for them. You know? You know, guys, I feel good about where we got in that. I feel like we really dove deep into that conversation. Do you guys enjoy the philosophical conversations? Was that a good topic to talk about today?
Making contact here. Opening fire. Shots fired. Got one here.
I'm not going to them saying that they're weird, but like, oh, it's normal. Yeah, I get you, man. Yeah. No, I wasn't saying that to you directly. I'm more just like, oh, you see that? Woo. Buffalo. That's funny, man. It was good going somewhat deeper into the word nerd. Yeah, I think like it could be fun to start getting a little deeper dives into stuff. I do like philosophical conversations. I figured since I didn't have a guest on today, it might be a good time to talk about one, like kind of play to one of my strengths and topics, which is, you know, I do like philosophy. I like diving into into concepts like that. So I think that was a good conversation for us to get into today. And I got a win, guys. Isn't that cool? Aren't you proud of me? So maybe we'll start doing more conversations like this in the future, because I definitely like them. I'll probably call it here in a minute, just because I'm kind of tired. It's been a very long day. So I might just I might call it soon. But I do appreciate you guys kind of having this conversation with me, allowing me to go a little deeper than I normally go. Again, I'm really excited for Wednesday, which is going to be when I start doing my Why This Sucks Wednesday on Wednesdays. Is the name of the segment, Why This Sucks on Wednesdays. You got carried like a baby. I totally got carried. I'm not denying that. But come on. We still got the dub at the end of the day. At the end of the day, a dub's a dub. A dub is a dub. No matter what you say. I need shields. Salty Burke is better than Salty Josh. Yeah. Dude, I'm going to start getting more salty on Wednesdays. That's basically the whole theme on the Wednesdays. It's just me getting salty. I'm going to let myself get angry at topics that I should not get angry about. Maybe I should get angry about them. You know what? Never mind. Scratch that.
1 minute until the nearby ring closes. Introducing a new variable. Trap set and waiting.
Sending out my decoy.
Still trying to figure out the wall drum. A dub is a dub. Truest thing I ever heard all day. A dub is a dub, man. That's what I'm saying.
30 seconds.
Here we go, boys. We're in the end game now.
Take a deep breath.
Amateurs.
My vision is clear. We're close. Taking fire. I still see everything.
Using the decoy escape.
Healing my wounds. My vision is clear. Vision is clear.
I think this place needs a little more me.
Healing my wounds.
I need health and shields. Oh,
Those care. Placing gas trap.
it's done. It's over. It is over, boys. And that's going to be over for my stream, I think, today. I'm going to call it. I'm going to try to get some rest. And then I'm going to hit heavy on Wednesdays. Oh, you just got you're the first one to ever do the highlighted messages because I have the stream points now. And once I get the sub-only emotes, because once you get to affiliate, you can do the sub-only emotes. And if you just watch long enough, you can get them for free. So I'll do that. Once you, me, Mr. Otter, we'll have our conversation. We should get somewhere deeper into the top. I know. I'm actually trying to get Trinity onto that stream as well. I'd really like to have him in a conversation about it. But I do want to talk more about a ton of other stuff. I got Wednesday rant is going to be on Suicide Squad. My Why This Sucks is going to be on Suicide Squad. Some other ones I want to talk about are the DC EU. I want to talk about the DCU in general. I want to talk about maybe the Star Wars fandom. Not Star Wars. I love Star Wars, but maybe the fandom's not so great. And I want to talk about why that sucks. And a couple other things. So anyway, that's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for being awesome again. And at 9 o'clock tonight, the episode, I'll push it to 8. So at 8 tonight, my stream from a few weeks ago with Stormbreaker is going to be, all right, stay it easy on me. You couldn't handle One Buffalo on live stream. Oh my goodness. Dude, I'll have you on sometime. Let's do it. Actually, you know what? I have to get caught up with the season, but let's do a Rick and Morty discussion. I'll have you on. Let's do a Rick and Morty discussion sometime. Because I know you have a ton to say about it. That would be a really, really, really fun conversation to have. Let's do that, actually. I'm 100% down. Plan for that. If you want to watch me and Stormbreaker's conversation, or if anyone else wants to, check that out on YouTube. It's going to be premiering at 8. So go watch that. That was a really fun conversation. We talked about what all of the Phase 4 movies are going to be about and what that's going to mean. I think you were already there for that One Buffalo. I don't remember if GB Crash was there. And then the DC one, the one talking about how we'd reboot the DC universe, that's going to get put up on Wednesday or Thursday. So keep an eye out for that. And then there's going to be some more videos coming out soon. And I look forward to seeing you guys on Wednesday. Thanks so much for making an awesome time. And One Buffalo will be on for that. I'll talk to you later about how we'll set that up. All right. So with that, I will catch you guys all later. Have a good one, and I'll see you on Wednesday as soon as I figure out how to turn it off. which might never